So for Azure Container Instance, it will be a second option we can think about it. So Azure Container Instance, why we cannot use it for Azure Container Instance? So it will be a big sense questions. So actually you could use it Azure Containers Instance here. You can use it for this type of a small application, but also it will be the same problem for Azure Batch. It will be a most cost effective solutions, and you have to remember we selected our solutions based on customer need. So the customer here requires the most effective solution or need to minimize solutions, so this will not be a good options for customer. And also Azure containers instance are charged based on, say, I will explain this point. See, if we go here for Azure, Azure calculators, and we go here for Azure container instance, let's do view. So the Azure containers instance are charged, as you see here, based on the number of across of cores, here for cores, their cores. So based on number of cores and amount of memory usage, so which can be added if your app run constantly or heavily usage spikes. So we are differentiate between two things. First one for Azure patch, and we ask ourselves or tell the customer why we cannot use Azure patch in our based on his solutions, and Azure container we cannot use it based in his solution. But both of them, Azure batch and Azure container, we can use it. But the based on requirement which the customer need for a small application, and we need to minimize the cost, we cannot use in this. But maybe another case we can use it. But in our case, we can't use it. So now what we have Azure Functions. So I will explain this point. If we go to Azure Calculator here, and we have Azure Functions. Azure Function here, let's view here. So here, serverless compute such as Azure Functions, or maybe if you work in AWS Lambda, are only charged based on the executions time of each individual request. So why I give the customer Azure Functions? Because we have three options, as we mentioned: Azure Functions and Batch and Azure Container Instance, and we need to give the customer the best solution. So we try to differentiate between Azure containers instance, which will not be most cost effective, and also Azure batch will be not most cost effective for customer, but Azure functions will be a good. Why? Because it's charged based on execution time of each individual request, make them most cost effective options for app with infrequent requests. So if you go here for back again for Azure containers instance, let's give you one hint. If you need to run app on containers and prefer to not use full containers orchestration solution like Azure Collaborator Service, you would consider use Azure Container Instance with auto scale enabled to keep costs low by only running the required number of containers. So if we ask me when we can use it, that if you don't know, if your customer don't need a fully container orchestration solutions like Azure Collaborator Service, we can use Azure Containers Instance. So again, for customers have small applications. For a small application with infrequently requests, it would be more efficiency and cost effective to use a serverless compute solutions like Azure Functions, or maybe if you work on AWS, will be AWS Lambda. These solutions provide a simple and cost-effective way to run code without to need to manage any infrastructures, and they automatically scale to handle incoming requests. So again, for a small application that receive it infrequently, web request containing encoding geographically coordinates and require cost to minimize, I would recommend to use a serverless compute. Serverless compute solutions such as Azure Functions. So Azure Functions, these solutions allow you or allow the customer or will help the customer to only pay for a specific resource used during the executions of individual requests. Make it the cost-effective choice for a cost and infrequently request. Okay, so let's go with just to make a refresh for your mind. So to refresh your mind, you have to work with some of case study. So let's go here to my board, and we have Azure Functions and Azure Container Instance and Azure Batch. So for Azure Functions, okay, we have two things here or three things. First one, we can use it if we have event driven data processing, okay, such as resizing a thumbnail generations, such as thumbnail generations, and also we can work with webhooks such as sending SMS or email notification based on a specific event. Also automating data integration such as sync data between SaaS applications. So what about this one? So stateless applications that need to run containers environments such as a simple web app or a microservice. Also, one-off tasks that need to run quickly, such as running database backup or data import. So Azure Batch, large-scale batching process such as render a movie or rendering 3D images. Also for high performance compute workloads such as scientific simulation or financial models. So let's talk about something related to case study. I will give you just for example. First one for Azure Functions here. We have three things. First one, if we have event driven data processing, such as image resizing, or thumbnail generations. So this will be related, or we have this solution event driven to use Azure Functions. Then second or two, we can use when we have a web hooks, such as if we need to send SMS, okay, or email notification, okay, based on a specific event. So we can use Azure Functions. Number three will be automate, or we can automate that data integrations. So such as, give me example here, such as sync data between software as a service applications. Okay, again, give me a case study for Azure Functions. Azure Functions we can use with event driven, we can such as image resizing, or we can use with web hooks such as send SMS or email notification, or we can automate data integration such as sync data between software as a service application. So what about here for Azure Containers Instance? So Azure containers, as we mentioned, will be for first one. Let's take red one. First one will be for stateless applications. Okay, for a stateless application that needed to run containerization environment, such as a simple web app. So simple web app, okay, or microservice. Then we are using for Azure container instance when we have something we call it, it's called, on one of tasks. It's called like that. One of tasks. What does that mean? One of tasks. Maybe you need it to run quickly, or such as to run database backup or data import. So this time we have something called one of task that need to run quickly, such as run backup, database, or data import. So again, in Azure container instance, we use it in two things. First one, for stateless applications that need to run containerization applications or containerization environment, such as a simple web app or microservice, or something like what I called one of tasks that need to run quickly for database backup or data import. So let's go with Azure Batch. Give me some of example in here. First one, it's easy. We use it for a large scale. Okay. And also for high performance compute. So Azure Batch will be for a large scale processing, such as if you need to rendering movie or render 3D image, we can using Azure Batch. So what about for high performance compute workloads, such as scientific simulations, as we mentioned, or financials model? Again, in the last of videos, we need just to recommend it for using a serverless compute, such as Azure Functions. These solutions allow the customer to only pay for a specific resource and use during the execution for each individual request. Make it, as we mentioned, for cost effective. It shows for infrequent requests. Additionally, these solutions for Azure Functions will be automatic scale the number of instances to handle income requests and eliminate the need of manual scale and reduce operational overhead. Thank you for everyone, and I hope it will give you an overview to differentiate between Azure Functions and Azure Container Instance and Azure Batch. And I will be more happy if you leave me a comment if you need ask me any question. Thank you for everyone.